On February 8, 2025, Namibia's founding president Sam Nujoma was pronounced dead at the age of 95. A true African revolutionary, Nujoma dedicated his life to the liberation struggle, leading Namibia from colonial oppression to independence.
The Namibian problem has been at the center of bitter international dispute over the last 4 decades. The United Nations and other international bodies produce huge volumes of resolutions in an attempt to resolve the intractable problem.
Now, from the formation of SWAPO to the armed resistance against the South African rule, he played a pivotal role in shaping the nation's destiny. So in this episode of Africa in History, we take an in-depth look at the life and legacy of Sam Nujoma, the visionary leader who fought against apartheid, led Namibia's independence movement, and became its first president. In the late 19th century, during the European scramble for Africa, Germany established a foothold in the region today known as Namibia. In 1884, Chancellor Otto von Bismarck declared the area as a German protectorate, naming it the German Southwest Africa. Now, the Heligoland-Zanzibar Treaty of 1890 further solidified Germany's territorial claims, granting them access to the Zambezi River via the Caprivi Strip. Now, German's colonial rule was characterized by exploitation and brutality. The indigenous Herero and Nama people faced severe oppression, including land deposition and forced labor. Now, tensions culminated in the Herero-Namakwa genocide between 1904 and 1908, where German forces under General Luther von Trotha implemented a policy of extermination. Now, this tragic period resulted in the death of an estimated 65 Herero people and 10,000 Namakwa people. Now, following the Germans' defeat in World War I, South African forces occupied German Southwest Africa in 1915. Now, the League of Nations subsequently mandated the territory to South Africa in 1920. However, instead of preparing the region for self-governance, South Africa treated it as a de facto fifth province, extending its apartheid policies to the territory. Now, after World War II, the newly formed United Nations sought to place the former German colonies under its trusteeship system, aiming to guide them towards independence. However, South Africa refused, insisting annexing the territory. Now, this defiance led to a prolonged international dispute. Now, within Namibia, the imposition of apartheid laws marginalized the indigenous population, restricting their movements, employment opportunities, and political rights, further fueling resistance movements. So in 1951, South Africa enforced its politics of racial discrimination by expanding the South African apartheid laws to Namibia. Now, this included the implementation of past laws, forced relocation, and establishment of homeland, which severely restricted the freedom of the indigenous population and led to widespread disenfranchisement. Now, the international community increasingly condemned South Africa's administration of Namibia. In 1966, the United Nations General Assembly revoked South Africa's mandate, declaring that it had no further right to administer the territory and that Southwest Africa, which was Namibia, could come under the direct responsibility of the United Nations. Now, despite international pressure, South Africa maintained its control over Namibia, continuing its oppressive policies and exploitation of the territory's resources. Now, this period saw the rise of the organized resistance movement, most notably the Southwest African People's Organization, which was commonly known as SWAPO, and played a crucial role in the struggle for independence. Now, throughout the 20th century, Namibians actively resisted colonial rule and apartheid policies imposed by the South African government. The indigenous population faced systematic discrimination, land deposition, and economic exploitation, leading to widespread discontent and emergence of organized resistance movements. In the late 1950s, the South African administration in Namibia sought to enforce apartheid spatial planning in Windhoek by relocating the black residents from the old location to a new township named Katutura, meaning the place where we do not want to live. Now, residents vehemently opposed this move as it disrupted established communities and forced them into unfamiliar areas with inferior amenities. So on December 10, 1959, tensions culminated in a tragic event when police opened fire on peaceful protesters, resulting in death of around 11 individuals and injuring many others. So this massacre intensified anti-colonial sentiments and became a catalyst for further resistance. Now, the apartheid regime implemented past laws to control the movement of black Namibians, requiring them to carry permits to enter or reside in urban areas. Now, these laws aim to regulate labor and suppress political activism by restricting freedom of movement. Now, non-compliance often led to arrest, fines, or forced labor, exacerbating tensions between the colonial authorities and the indigenous populations. So in 1957, Andimba Toivo Yatoivo, along with other Namibian migrant workers in Cape Town, founded the Ovamboland People's Congress, the OPC. Now, the OPC aimed to address the grievances of the Ovambo contract workers and oppose South African annexation of Namibia. The organization later evolved into the Ovamboland People's Organization, the OPO, and eventually to the Southwest African People's Organization, SWAPO, which became the leading force in Namibia's struggle for independence. Now, the persistent oppression and refusal of South African government to heed to peaceful protests led to the radicalization of the Namibian liberation movement. Now, SWAPO established its military wing, the People's Liberation Army of Namibia, which was commonly known as PLAN, to wage an armed struggle against the colonial rule. Now, this marked a significant shift from passive resistance to active armed conflict, reflecting the growing determination of the Namibian people to achieve self-determination and end apartheid. Now, these events underscored the resilience and determination of the Namibian people in their pursuit of freedom and justice, setting the stage for the protracted struggle and eventually led to independence in 1990. Samuel Shafishuna Daniel Nujoma was born on May 12, 1929 in the village of Epunda, located in Ojagera area near Okahao in Ovamboland, northern Namibia. He was the eldest of his parents' 11 children. His mother was a princess, a lineage that later reinforced Nujoma's charismatic influence during his political career. Now, growing up in a family of subsistence farmers, Nujoma spent his early years tending to cattle and engaging in traditional farming activities. Education opportunities were limited in Ovamboland, but at the age of 10, he began attending a Finnish missionary school in Okahao. He went on to complete Standard 6, the highest level of education available to black Namibians at the time. So in 1946, at the age of 17 years, Nujoma moved to the coastal town of Walvis Bay to live with his aunt. Now, while there, he secured employment at the general store, earning a modest salary. He also worked at the whaling station, where he interacted with individuals from various countries, including Argentina and Norway. Now, these interactions exposed him to global political ideas and the broader worldview beyond Namibia. Now, in 1949, Nujoma relocated to Windhoek, the capital city, where he worked as a cleaner for the South African Railways. Now, determined to further his education, he attended night classes at the St. Barnabas Anglican Church School in the old location, focusing on improving his English proficiency. He also pursued studies through the correspondence courses within the Trans-African Correspondence Colleges in South Africa. Now, during this period, Nujoma became increasingly aware of the systematic injustices faced by the black Namibians under South African rule. Now, the apartheid policies, including past laws and forced relocations, fueled his resolve to engage in political activism. Now, his experiences in Windhoek laid the foundation for his future role as a leader in Namibia's struggle for independence. These formative years were crucial in shaping Sam Nujoma's worldview and commitment to the liberation of his people, setting the stage for the subsequent leadership in the fight against colonial oppression. In 1959, Sam Nujoma co-founded the Ovamboland People's Organization, the OPO, focusing on the rights of the Ovambo people. Now, recognizing the need for a broader national movement, the OPO reconstituted itself as the Southwest African People's Organization, SWAPO, on April 19, 1960 in New York. Nujoma was elected as the SWAPO's first president in absentia. In June 1960, Nujoma arrived in New York, where he petitioned the United Nations General Assembly's Fourth Committee, demanding that Namibia's independence by 1963 should be achieved. Following his UN engagement, he returned to Tanganyika, now Tanzania, in 1961, establishing SWAPO's provisional headquarters in Dar es Salaam. Now, with the support from African leaders like Julius Nyerere, Nujoma arranged scholarships and military training for Namibians joining the liberation struggle. So in 1962, under Nujoma's leadership, SWAPO founded its armed wing, the Southwest African Liberation Army SWALA, that was later renamed to the People's Liberation Army of Namibia Plan. Nujoma personally procured the first weapons from Algeria, facilitating their transport through Egypt, Sudan, Tanzania, and Zambia up to Ovamboland in Namibia. So on March 21, 1966, Nujoma and Hifike Punye Pohamba tested the South Africa's claim by chartering a plane to Windhoek. Upon arrival, they were arrested and deported to Zambia the next day. This incident highlighted the oppressive measures of the South African administration. So in 1969, at the Tanga Consultative Conference in Tanzania, Nujoma was reaffirmed as the SWAPO's president. Under his leadership, SWAPO intensified its diplomatic efforts and armed resistance, solidifying its position as the primary force in Namibia's struggle for independence. Now, through these efforts, Sam Nujoma played a pivotal role in transforming SWAPO from a regional organization into a national liberation movement, garnering international support and leading the fight against colonial rule. In 1962, under Sam Nujoma's leadership, the Southwest African People's Organization SWAPO established its military wing, the Southwest African Liberation Army SWALA, which was later renamed to the People's Liberation Army of Namibia Plan. Now this move marked a strategic shift from political advocacy to armed resistance against the South African colonial rule. Now Nujoma, as the commander-in-chief of Plan and the chairman of SWAPO's military council, played a pivotal role in organizing and directing the armed struggle. The armed struggle commenced on August 26, 1966, when Plan combatants engaged the South African forces in northern Namibia. This confrontation is widely regarded as the beginning of the Namibian War of Independence. Now, Plan adopted a guerrilla warfare tactics, conducting hit-and-run attacks, sabotaging missions, and ambushes targeting South African military installations and infrastructure. Now, these tactics aim to destabilize the colonial administration and draw international attention to Namibia's quest for independence. Now, the South African apartheid regime responded to the insurgency by enacting repressive laws, notably the Terrorism Act of 1967. This legislation granted authorities sweeping powers to detain individuals indefinitely without trial, suppressing political dissent and targeting those suspected of supporting the liberation movement. Now, many SWAPO members and sympathizers were arrested, tortured, or killed under this act, highlighting the brutal measures employed to maintain colonial rule. Now, Plan faced significant logistical challenges, including securing weapons, training fighters, and establishing supply lines. Now, this movement relied on support from sympathetic African nations and international allies. Neighboring countries like Zambia and Angola provided crucial bases for training and launching operations. However, operating from these countries also posed challenges, as the South African forces frequently conducted cross-border raids to disrupt Plan activities. Now, throughout the armed struggle, Sam Nujoma remained a central figure, not only in the military operations, but also in garnering international support. He traveled extensively, addressing the United Nations and engaging with global leaders to highlight Namibia's plight and seek assistance. Now, Nujoma's diplomatic efforts were instrumental in isolating the South African regime and securing material and moral support for the liberation struggle. Now, the protracted armed struggle exerted sustained pressure on the South African government, contributing to its eventual willingness to negotiate. Now, Plan's resilience, despite facing a better-equipped adversary, demonstrated the determination of the Namibian people to achieve self-determination. The armed struggle, combined with international diplomatic efforts, set the stage for Namibia's eventual transition to independence in 1990. Now, through strategic leadership and unwavering commitment, Sam Nujoma and Plan played a crucial role in dismantling colonial rule and paving the way for a sovereign Namibian state. Now, throughout its history, SWAPO faced internal challenges, particularly concerning the suppression of dissent. Now, during the liberation struggle, SWAPO leaders, including Nujoma, were known to suppress internal dissent to maintain unity and authority within the movement. This suppression often involved the detention and alleged torture of members suspected of disloyalty or dissent. Now, Sam Nujoma's leadership style has been described as heavy-handed and authoritarian, particularly in response to internal crises. Such an approach allowed Nujoma and his close associates to consolidate power within SWAPO, often resulting in imprisonment of members who expressed dissent. After Namibia gained independence in 1990, internal tensions within SWAPO persisted. In 2005, the former Trade Minister Josiah Nyambo criticized Nuyoma's leadership, accusing him of causing divisions among his party members and undermining collective leadership. Now, Nyambo described Nuyoma's role as totalitarian, suggesting that his support was detrimental to the party's unity and future. So in 2020, Nujoma himself acknowledged the challenges within SWAPO, urging the party to return to its fundamental principles and serve the people carefully. He emphasized the need for the party to change the course and address internal issues to maintain its relevance and effectiveness. The internal challenges within SWAPO, including suppression of dissent and authoritarian leadership practices, have left a complex legacy. Now, while the party successfully led Namibia to independence, these issues have prompted ongoing debates about governance, democracy, and human rights within the organizations. On May 4, 1978, the South African Defence Forces, the SADF, launched a significant airborne assault on Cassinga, a former mining town in southern Angola, approximately 260 kilometers north of the Namibian border. The operation, codenamed Operation Rendia, targeted what the SADF identified as a major base of the Southwest African People's Organization, SWAPO. Now, their intelligence suggested that Cassinga served as SWAPO's military headquarters, coordinating operations against the Southwest Africa, now Namibia, was a central hub for training and logistics. Now, the attack commenced with a pre-dawn aerial bombardment by the South African Air Force, Canberra bombers and airstrikes, aiming to neutralize the SWAPO's anti-aircraft defense systems. Now, following this bombardment, approximately 370 parachuters from the SADF's 44 Parachute Brigade were deployed into Cassinga. Their objectives included destroying SWAPO's infrastructure, gathering intelligence, and capturing enemy combatants. Now, unbeknown to the SADF, a Cuban military contingent was stationed near Cassinga. Now, as the paratroopers advanced, they encountered unexpected resistance from both the SWAPO fighters and the Cuban forces equipped with armed vehicles and anti-craft artillery. Now, the ensuing battle was intense, with the South African Defence Force calling in close air support to suppress the enemy positions. Now, the South African Defence Forces reported minimal casualties of 3 soldiers killed and 11 wounded. Estimates of the SWAPO and Cuban casualties would go on to vary, with some reports indicating that 600 were dead and numerous were wounded. The high number of casualties, including non-combatants, led to the international condemnation. SWAPO and various international observers labeled the attack as a massacre, asserting that Cassinga was primarily a refugee camp with inadequate defense systems, while the South African Defence Forces maintained that it was a legitimate military target. Now, the Battle of Cassinga had profound political repercussions. The United Nations and numerous countries condemned the raid, intensifying global scrutiny of the South Africa's apartheid policies and its military actions beyond its borders. Now, for SWAPO, Cassinga became a symbol of resistance and sacrifice, commemorated annually as the Cassinga Day. Now, the battle underscored the escalating intensity of the South African border wars, highlighted the complex interplay of regional and international forces in South African area during that era. So in summary, the Battle of Cassinga stands as a pivotal and contentious episode in Namibia's liberation struggle, reflecting the broader conflicts and geopolitical dynamics of that time. So if you found this video informative and engaging, don't forget to give it a like, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow. This has been Regan for Africa in History, and see you in another video.